Hey, it's Concrete. Third Flavorah beta testing video today. So today I have their Carrot, their Sangria, and their Peppermint. And I'll go ahead and flash the nifty little disclaimer thing there at the bottom. But once again, these are pre-release flavors. I didn't pay for them. They don't really affect my view at all. But, you should probably know. I did get some information on when these are coming out. They should be coming out October 6th. And they should be exclusive to Bull City Flavors and Nicotine River for about a month. So that could be helpful. But starting out, I have their Carrot. And I was super excited for their Carrot. It seems like something that you shouldn't be excited for. But I really wanted a good carrot flavor. And I had tried Real Flavors Super Concentrate Carrot. Didn't really work out so well for me. First of all, really, really earthy. Second of all, it has a lot of particulates in it. And I don't usually get too precious about my vaping. I figure I'm not smoking, so, what's a hazardous chemical here or there? But it has a lot of particulates. And it's very orange, too, which is kind of distressing. But here is their Carrot. I'm testing it at 3% here. Okay, so right off the bat, this is a raw carrot flavor. I was kind of hoping for like kind of a bakery, sweeter carrot flavor without too much of a peel note. This does have a bit of a peel note to it. And where I was talking about the Real Flavors version being like super earthy and aggressive, this is at least a very thoroughly washed peel note. It definitely has that kind of like raw, crisp, sort of astringent, like carrot peel note. I want to say it's not like one of those big old dirty carrots that you end up buying the bag and then not using the entire thing. But it certainly isn't like a full on baby carrot where there's no peel on it. With that said, there is like a nicer kind of sweeter carrot base to this. A little bit of almost like a carrot juice. I feel like that astringent top note kind of dries out the vape just a little bit, so I'm not getting too much of like a juicy texture. It definitely has like a more solid, sweet carrot juice flavor underneath that peel note. It's definitely not bad, actually, and it's certainly a step up from some of the other available options, but I'm not sure it's like the bakery carrot for carrot cake that everybody's been dying for. In terms of using this, I would end up pairing this with citrus, really. Like oranges and carrots go really well together. I think some sharper citrus would go ahead and clean up a little bit of that peel note. Also works well with like apples and pears in general too. There's a little bit of throatiness to this, which it takes a little bit to get used to. Unfortunately, it's not particularly smooth. Feels like it's going to need like some ethyl maltol or like a fruit flavor with some actual maltol in it to kind of calm down the throat hit a bit. But if you don't mind the throat hit, or if you have a good way around it, Flavorah's Persimmon is an excellent flavor that's just a little too harsh. If you're cool with that, why not go full bore, mix it with some carrot. It's going to taste delicious together. Carrot also goes fairly well with pineapple in general. And then there's a whole bunch of really interesting spice pairings, like ginger and cloves and cardamom and all sorts of other like really interesting things that you can do with that carrot spice. I think you could use this for a bakery, just because that peel note is fairly aggressive, and even at like a lower percentage, like I tested this at 0.25%, I was still getting a fairly clear, like distinct carrot taste with enough of that peel note that you could tell it was a carrot, but it wasn't getting overwhelming. I think for like a busier bakery, like a carrot cake, you might be able to get by with an accent percentage on this, like around 0.25, 0.5% maybe at the outset, and still get enough carrot in your actual mix to kind of pull off one of those carrot cakes. If you were going to be mixing it with fruit or doing anything that involved like a juicier application, I'd say more like 1.5%, 2%, somewhere around there. But I can definitely say without hesitation, it is a whole lot better than real flavor super concentrated carrot. So if you had your eye on that and you want a pretty decent carrot flavor, this one definitely fits the bill. Okay, so next there's another flavor that I was really excited for. It's their sangria flavor. It turned out to be kind of interesting. So the first thing that you notice about this when mixing it is this steeps really quickly. So like on a fresh mix, you get a fairly aggressive orange citrus, some boozy brandy, and like some pretty boozy like red wine notes, and there's maybe like a little bit of apple or pear sweetness to the entire thing. Even given about 4 days, it calms down substantially. It actually becomes more of a base flavor for Flavorah, and that's a little interesting. A lot of the Flavorah stuff that I like is sort of bright, vivid top notes. This is definitely like a deep, warm, like mulled wine with a little bit of brandy. The booze note after it's steeped, it isn't really like a hot booze. Instead, it's more of just a little bit of like a brandy touch. It's definitely like a red wine sangria. You don't get really like any oak or tannins. It's definitely like a flatter red grape wine flavor, almost something more like a Merlot. And then that citrus goes from like being fairly bright and having a good amount of zest to kind of just like adding like an orange sweetness to the entire thing. I think that apple and the pear that I sort of detect on it when it's freshly mixed kind of calms down a bit and moves more into just kind of fleshing out that brandy note. This is going to be interesting to mix with. Just because it's a base, you're going to have to use it a little bit different than you're used to using a lot of Flavorah flavors. I would look at it as a mulled wine base more than anything else, for like a glue vine, or you like my German there? A glue vine, or something that requires like that sort of heavier, warmer, sweeter wine note. I think the brandy and the wine here are really well balanced together, and the fruitiness doesn't really sort of make you think of chunks of fruit. It instead makes you think of, fruit that's been mulled in that wine. There's no spice note here that I can really find. So if you are going in that mulled wine direction, that'd be the first place you want to go, is to spice. Again, like cinnamon or anise or cardamom or ginger or something to kind of spice it up a little bit. Percentage use on this, it seems a little weak for a Flavorah flavor. I had a steep tester of this at 3%, and with a lot of Flavorah flavors, that'd be completely overbearing. It really wasn't. It did, as you start to crank up the percentage, though, it does start to go a little bit gummy. It almost has like a warm Flavorah blackcurrant kind of taste to it. So like my best balance for this, at least just going through these single flavor tests, I liked it more at like 2%, where you still get most of the sweetness from that wine, that complexity from the brandy. The orange sweetness is good, but it doesn't feel like you're just throwing too much flavor at anything, and it doesn't have that same kind of like gummied texture to it. The warmth is a little distracting if you were expecting like a chilled fruit sangria. And I still think it'd be fairly hard to kind of turn it into that kind of sangria. First of all, you'd have to be aiming for a red wine sangria just right off the bat. But you'd need to come back in with some of those brighter fruit flavors and some cooling to kind of sell it. But I'm not sure it's going to be the base for that. Overall, I like the flavor. We'll see how well it mixes, though. That's going to be the big test for this one. Using a Flavorah flavor around 2% for a base flavor is kind of like new territory for me, but we'll see how it works out. So finally, we have their peppermint. And peppermint is kind of a hard flavor to not get right, but we'll see what happens. So right off the bat, I was hoping for like more of an herbal peppermint. I feel like there's already a lot of peppermints on the market, and they all do a variation of peppermint candy. I was hoping for something like leafier or greener. Didn't get it with this. This is definitely another peppermint candy flavor. To me, at least, it's just sweet enough to kind of keep the peppermint here from feeling too like thin and aggressive. The sweetness fills it out a little bit. I think when you're underneath like 1%, that peppermint candy is a little bit more prominent in the mix, and kind of balances it out. The actual candy flavor provides a little bit of warmth, some sweetness, and it's definitely not a bad peppermint candy flavor. It's less sweet than some of the alternatives. It's definitely like less sweet than Cap's peppermint. But functionally, I don't see too much of a difference in this, at least in terms of the way it tastes, to something like Flavor Art's White Winter. No, that's their spearmint. Whatever the hell Flavor Art's peppermint's called, or TFA's peppermint. The cooling here is actually really nice. It's kind of aggressively cooled, especially once you get past 1%. But it's aggressive, but it's fairly smooth. There's nothing like chemical or off about it. It works well with the sweetness underneath. Cooling is one of those things that's, like even more so than most vaping stuff. Cooling is really subjective. So like suggested use percentage here is going to be a little bit harder. I liked it up at 3%, but I like a lot of cooling. I think in terms of general use, if you want a cooler peppermint, not a peppermint candy, I'd probably start around 1%, maybe 1.5%, and work up from there. If you're just after the peppermint candy here, you're probably better off starting a little bit lower, like 0.25%. That candy note is subdued enough, though, that I feel like this is going to be one of your better choices of mixing with like fruits and stuff that you want, like that peppermint cool note, but you don't necessarily want a ton of candy. And I think in the same way, like it's going to be a pretty good peppermint for mixing with like creams and marshmallows and that kind of stuff, where that candy texture and sweetness could wreak a little bit of havoc before you get enough cooling out of it. So it's a very solid, very versatile peppermint flavor. The question for me, at some of the price points, is this gonna like hands down beat the other peppermints at the market if it's just a normal profile like that? I will say this feels quite a bit stronger than Capella's peppermint. Just random guess, but it feels like maybe about 3 times stronger than Capella's peppermint, and a little bit less sweet. Maybe about twice as strong as TPA's peppermint or Flavor Art's peppermint. So it's definitely not a bad choice. I don't know what it brings to the table that's exactly new, but it's definitely a solid flavor. So yeah, thank you for watching. This has been video number 3 in the Flavorah test series. I will, of course, have many more of these. I figured I'd go ahead and get interesting this week, though, and work in a couple extra videos. My goal for this week right now is to work in a video on graham crackers and then a video on blackberries, mostly because I want to do something horrific to Flavor Art blackberry. So pretend to act surprised when I do something horrific to Flavor Art blackberry. But I hope this helps. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you later.